The ships appeared over Earth on a Tuesday morning, their forms massive and utterly silent against the blue sky. There were 12 of them, each one larger than any structure humanity had ever built. They hung in orbit like monuments. Waiting, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the United Earth Government Assembly Hall, watching the alien delegation enter. She had spent 3 months in space after humanity's first faster-than-light test had apparently triggered every sensor in this region of the galaxy. 3 months learning that humans were not alone. 3 months discovering that being alone might have been better. The aliens walked with careful, measured steps. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. The leader was tall and slim, with 4 legs and a long neck that reminded Sarah of pictures she had seen of ancient Earth giraffes. Its skin was covered in soft blue fur, and its eyes were large and positioned on the sides of its head. It wore robes that shimmered like water. "I am Ambassador Kellis of the Arxian people," the creature said through a translation device that hung in the air. "I speak for the Galactic Concordat, a union of 47 species spanning 3,000 star systems. We have come to welcome humanity to the greater galaxy, and to deliver an important message." The human representatives sat in silence. President Morrison, a gray-haired woman who had led Earth through first contact, nodded slowly. "We're listening." Kellis moved to the center of the room. With a gesture, a holographic display appeared in the air. It showed a map of local space, with thousands of stars marked in soft green light. A small red sphere surrounded Earth and its nearest neighbors. "This is your permitted zone," Kellis said. 10 light-years in all directions from your home star. Within this space, humanity may develop as you wish. You may colonize suitable worlds. You may advance your technology. But you must not expand beyond these boundaries. The room erupted in whispers. Sarah felt her hands curl into fists. She had spent her entire career pushing humanity toward the stars. And now, after finally achieving faster-than-light travel, they were being told to stop. "Why?" President Morrison asked, her voice calm but firm. Kellis turned its large eyes toward her. "Because you are predators." The word hung in the air like a curse. One of the other aliens, a creature that looked like a large rabbit covered in crystalline scales, stepped forward. Its translator voice was higher, almost musical. "The Concordat was founded 8,000 years ago," it said. "Our species had all evolved on different worlds, but we shared something fundamental. We were all prey animals. We all knew the terror of being hunted. When we reached the stars and found each other, we made a promise. Never again would predators rule. Never again would hunters dominate the galaxy." Another alien spoke, this one resembling a massive tortoise with 6 legs. "We eliminated the predators from our worlds. We built a civilization based on cooperation, on peaceful coexistence. For 8,000 years, we have maintained order. Species that join the Concordat accept our fundamental law. Predator species are not permitted to expand." Sarah stood up, unable to contain herself. "You're judging us based on our evolutionary history? On what our ancestors were millions of years ago?" Kellis looked at her with what might have been sympathy. "Captain Chen, we have studied your species carefully since detecting your first FTL test. We have observed your behavior, your history, your culture. You are not merely descended from predators. You are predators. You hunt for sport. You organize your societies around competition. Your entertainment celebrates violence. Your economies reward aggressive behavior. Your greatest heroes are warriors and conquerors." "That's not fair," President Morrison said, standing now. "We've moved beyond our primitive past. We have laws, ethics, cooperation. We've had global peace for 60 years. 60 years, the rabbit-like alien said softly. "We have had 8,000 years of peace. Your longest period without warfare in your entire recorded history is 60 years. Do you not see the difference? Krino. Clom. Clomber. Clomber. Clom. Kellis raised one long limb, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed another star system, one marked in black. This was the Ketheric system. 500 years ago, another predator species refused to accept Concordat authority. They were hunters like you, evolved from pack carnivores. They believed they could coexist with us, peacefully. They were wrong. The display showed ships, thousands of them, surrounding a planet. Then it showed fire. Cities burning. Oceans boiling. The planet turning from blue and green to black and red. We gave them 10 years to comply, Kellis said quietly. They refused. They attacked our borders. They killed millions of our people. We had no choice but to respond with total force. The Ketheric species no longer exists. Their worlds are dead. We do not take pride in this. We mourned every life lost. But we will not allow predators to threaten the peace we have built. The room was silent now. Sarah felt cold, despite the warm air. She looked at the other human representatives and saw the same expression on every face. Fear, anger, disbelief. President Morrison spoke carefully. What exactly are you proposing? You have one standard year to decide, Kellis said. You may accept our terms, remain within your designated zone, accept our monitoring. Allow us to regulate your technology to ensure you cannot threaten Concordat space. In return, we will trade with you. We will share medical knowledge, agricultural techniques, entertainment. You will have good lives within your sphere. And if we refuse? Morrison asked. Kellis was quiet for a long moment. Then you will be treated as the Ketheric were treated. We do not wish this. We are not a cruel people. But we will not negotiate with predators. We will not risk 8,000 years of peace for one species that cannot control its nature. Another alien stepped forward, smaller than the others, covered in soft feathers that changed color as it moved. Please understand, it said, and its translated voice was gentle. We are offering you mercy. Other predator species we have encountered, we destroyed immediately. But humans are young. You have not yet committed crimes against the Concordat. You have a chance that others did not. Please take it. The delegation began to leave. As they walked toward the door, President Morrison called out, We need time to discuss this among ourselves. 1 year is not long. 1 year is not long. Kellis turned back. 1 year is generous. We have given predator species as little as 1 month before. Use the time wisely. We will return for your answer. After the aliens left, the assembly hall erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, arguing about submission versus defiance. Sarah pushed through the crowd to where President Morrison stood with her military advisors. We can't accept this, Sarah said. They're asking us to become a zoo exhibit. General Marcus Webb, head of Earth's Space Defense Force, nodded grimly. I agree. But did you see what they did to that planet? We've got maybe 100 ships capable of combat. They have thousands, maybe millions. So we roll over? Sarah demanded. We just achieved FTL travel. And we're supposed to give up on the stars? Morrison looked tired. Let's not make hasty decisions. We have a year. Let's use it to gather information, to prepare, to understand what we're facing. Over the following months, humanity threw itself into preparation. Scientists studied every scrap of data about the Concordat. Military strategists ran simulations. Diplomats debated options. The alien delegation had left observation satellites in orbit, watching Earth's every move. Sarah was assigned to lead a reconnaissance mission. She took a small, stealthy ship to the edge of the designated zone and watched Concordat ships patrol the border. They moved in predictable patterns, always in groups, always following the same routes. They were disciplined and organized, but there was something about their movements that struck her as odd. They never took risks. They never deviated from procedure. They were cautious to the point of timidity. She reported her observations to General Webb. "They fight like prey animals," she said. "Everything is about defense, about safety in numbers. They don't take initiative." Webb studied her report carefully. "Interesting. But we're still outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The year passed quickly. Human colonies on Mars and the outer planets were expanded rapidly. Weapons were manufactured in secret facilities. Every person on Earth knew that a decision was coming, but no one knew what it would be. When the Concordat delegation returned, they found President Morrison waiting with Earth's answer. The meeting was broadcast across every human settlement in the solar system. "We have considered your offer carefully," Morrison said. "We understand your concerns. We recognize that our history has been violent, but we cannot accept your terms." Kellis tilted its long neck, those large eyes reflecting what might have been sadness. "You choose extinction over compromise?" "We choose freedom over imprisonment," Morrison replied. "You're asking us to stop being human. You're asking us to abandon our drive to explore, to expand, to grow. That's not something we can do, no matter how nicely you ask." "Then you choose war," Kellis said softly. "No," Morrison said. "You're the ones choosing war. We're just choosing not to surrender before it starts." "There's a difference." The rabbit-like alien stepped forward, its scales shimmering with agitation. "You cannot win. You must understand this. We have technology thousands of years beyond yours. We have numbers you cannot match. This is suicide." Sarah, standing behind Morrison, spoke up. "Maybe. But humans have a saying. We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees." Kellis studied the humans for a long moment. "You are making a terrible mistake. When we return, it will be with a fleet large enough to blockade every world you inhabit. You will have one more chance to surrender. After that, we will do what must be done." "We'll take our chances," Morrison said. The aliens left. As their ships departed Earth orbit, Sarah felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something older. Something that had been sleeping in humanity's DNA for millions of years. Her ancestors had been hunters on the African plains, chasing prey across endless grasslands, never giving up, never stopping until the target fell. The Concordat thought they were the civilized ones, and humans were savage predators who needed to be caged. They didn't understand what they had just done. They had given humans a warning. They had given humans time to prepare. They had given humans a target. Most importantly, they had given humans a reason to hunt. General Webb stood beside Sarah, watching the alien ships vanish into faster-than-light travel. "They think we're going to fight them the way they fight each other. Formal battles, organized fleets, predictable strategies." Sarah smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "They have no idea what's coming." "No," Webb agreed. "They don't. They've spent 8,000 years being prey animals. They've forgotten what it means to be hunted by something that never stops, never tires, and never gives up." President Morrison joined them at the window. "How long do we have?" "My guess? 6 months," Webb said. "They'll need time to assemble their peacekeeping fleet, to coordinate their species, to plan their blockade. Then we have 6 months to disappear," Sarah said. Morrison looked at her questioningly. "They're coming here expecting to find us," Sarah explained. "Big targets. Planets, stations, fleets in formation. That's how they think. That's how prey animals survive, by staying together, by being too big to attack easily." "But we're not prey animals," Webb said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "No," Sarah agreed. "We're hunters. And the first rule of hunting is, don't let the prey see you coming." In the months that followed, humanity began to scatter. Colonies were evacuated into asteroid belts and the outer darkness of their systems. Ships were painted black and fitted with stealth systems. Entire populations learned to live in silence, in cold, in the spaces between stars. The Concordat was coming to cage humanity. But when they arrived, they would find nothing but empty worlds and silence. And then, in that silence, humanity would teach them an old lesson, one that prey animals on Earth had learned millions of years ago when they first heard human footsteps in the grass behind them. The hunt was about to begin. The Concordat fleet arrived exactly 6 months later, and it was magnificent. 842 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation around Earth. They were beautiful vessels, sleek and elegant, decorated with symbols from dozens of different species. Their hulls gleamed in the sunlight, proud and confident. Admiral Theron, a member of the Vree species that resembled large deer with hands instead of hooves, stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmonious Dawn. His eyes were positioned on the sides of his head, giving him an almost complete field of vision around his body. It was an adaptation his ancestors had evolved to watch for predators. Now, it helped him monitor multiple screens at once as his fleet surrounded the human homeworld. "All ships report ready status," his tactical officer announced. The officer was Keleth, a species with large ears and sensitive hearing that could detect sounds across vast ranges. "We have established positions around their primary world and all colonial holdings. Scanning for human fleet locations." Theron nodded, feeling satisfied. This was the largest peacekeeping operation in Concordat history, but it was necessary. The humans needed to see that resistance was pointless. They needed to understand the power arrayed against them. "Admiral," the scanning officer said, confusion in her translated voice. "I'm not detecting their fleet. They must be on the far side of the planet," Theron said, hiding behind their world, perhaps buying time. "No, sir," the officer replied. "I've completed a full scan. There are no military vessels in orbit. There are no military vessels in the system at all." Theron felt a spike of concern. What about their colonies? Mars? Their outer planets? More scans. More confusion. "Sir, the colonies appear to be empty. I'm detecting no power signatures, no life signs, no active systems." "That's impossible," Theron said. "We monitored this system constantly. They had millions of people in those colonies. Where did they go?" For the next 3 hours, the Concordat fleet searched the Sol system. They found empty cities on Mars, their lights dark. They found abandoned stations around Jupiter's moons, their reactors cold. They found nothing on Earth's surface but automated defense systems that powered down the moment Concordat ships approached. "They ran," Theron's second officer said with satisfaction. The officer was Arxian, like Ambassador Kellis, with the same long neck and large side-facing eyes. "The predators saw our strength and fled. We should consider this a victory. We can report that humanity surrendered without conflict." But Theron was not so certain. He had studied human history during his preparation for this mission. Humans did not flee easily. They were stubborn, aggressive, territorial. This felt wrong. "Send word to the Concordat Council," he ordered. "Inform them that we have occupied the human home system without resistance, but that the human population has relocated to unknown positions. Request instructions." The response came back within a day. The council was pleased. Humanity had apparently accepted the futility of resistance and withdrawn to their permitted zone. The fleet should establish permanent monitoring stations and maintain the blockade to ensure humans did not attempt to expand beyond their boundaries. Theron began implementing these orders, dividing his fleet into patrol groups and establishing a network of sensor satellites throughout human space. It was tedious work, but necessary. Within 2 weeks, the Concordat had effectively claimed the Sol system. That was when the attacks began. The first incident happened at a supply depot 17 light-years from Earth. A convoy of 6 transport ships was bringing food and equipment to the Concordat forces occupying human territory. They were traveling along a well-established route, protected by 2 military escorts. They simply disappeared. One moment, The convoy was transmitting normal status reports. The next moment, all communications ceased. When rescue ships arrived at their last known position, they found debris scattered across thousands of kilometers. The ships had been destroyed, but not by weapons fire. They had been torn apart, their hulls ripped open, their cargo stolen. Pirates? Suggested one of Theron's officers. In this region, Theron replied. There haven't been pirates in Concordate space for centuries. And how would pirates know our supply routes? 3 days later, another convoy vanished. Then a communication relay station went dark. Then a patrol of 6 Concordat vessels entered an asteroid field to investigate a sensor contact and never reported back. Theron stared at the tactical map in his command center, watching red markers appear one by one as Concordat assets went missing. They were all behind the front lines, all in territory that should have been secure, and there was never any warning. No distress calls. What are we facing? His tactical officer asked nervously. The Keleth officer's large ears were twitching constantly, listening to every sound in the ship, jumping at every unexpected noise. I think we're facing humans, Theron said quietly. They didn't run away. They just moved to hunting grounds we couldn't monitor. He was right. While the Concordat fleet had been occupying empty worlds, humanity had scattered into the darkness between stars. Colony populations had evacuated to massive asteroid bases hidden in the outer reaches of their systems. Ships had dispersed into the black, going completely silent, waiting and watching. Captain Sarah Chen commanded one of those ships. The EFS Silent Knife was a destroyer that had been modified for stealth operations. Its hull was coated in materials that absorbed sensor radiation. Its engines were tuned to produce minimal signatures. It could drift through space like a piece of debris, utterly invisible to conventional scanners. She sat in her command chair, surrounded by a crew of 43 men and women who had all volunteered for this mission. They had been drifting through deep space for 2 weeks, surviving on minimal power, eating cold rations, sleeping in shifts to conserve heat. The ship was freezing. The air was stale. Everyone's breath formed clouds in the dim light. Contact, her sensor officer whispered. Even though no one could hear them across the vacuum of space, everyone on the ship spoke in whispers now. It felt natural. Concordat supply ship, bearing 27 Mark III. Looks like a freighter, civilian configuration. No military escort. Sarah studied the tactical display. The alien ship was moving along a predictable route, its drive signature bright and obvious. It was advertising its position to the universe, confident in the safety of Concordat space. Time to intercept? 4 hours if we use cold thrusters, the navigation officer replied. We can coast most of the way on current trajectory. They won't see us coming. Sarah nodded. All hands, prepare for action. Weapons, load boarding pods. Marines, suit up. The Silent Knife drifted closer, using tiny puffs of nitrogen gas to adjust its course. It was slow, patient work. Sarah watched the distance close meter by meter, kilometer by kilometer. The alien ship continued on its path, unaware. When they were within 500 meters, Sarah gave the order. Launch pods. 6 small cylinders shot from the Silent Knife, crossing the gap in seconds. They clamped onto the alien freighter's hull, like parasites. Teams of human marines in spacesuits cut through the outer hull with plasma torches and poured inside. The aliens on board never knew what hit them. The crew was Vree, peaceful herbivores who had spent their entire lives in safe Concordat space. They had never encountered pirates, never experienced violence. When armed humans came through their walls, they ran and hid, their prey instincts overwhelming their training. The humans didn't kill them. Sarah had given strict orders. Take prisoners. Avoid casualties, unless necessary. The Marines stunned the crew with electric weapons and secured them in a cargo hold. Then they looted the ship, taking food, fuel, spare parts, and most importantly, data cores containing Concordat star charts and fleet positions. 20 minutes after the boarding pods launched, the Marines were back on the Silent Knife with their cargo. Sarah studied the terrified alien prisoners through a video feed. "Tell them we'll drop them at a neutral station," she said to her communications officer. "Make sure they understand. They were lucky. Next time, they might meet humans who aren't so kind." The prisoners were transferred to life pods and launched toward the nearest inhabited system. Then, the Silent Knife went silent again, drifting back into the darkness to study the stolen data and plan the next strike. This pattern repeated across dozens of systems. Human ships struck from the black, hit their targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They targeted supply lines, communication networks, isolated patrols. They never engaged in fair fights. They never announced their presence. They simply appeared, attacked, and disappeared. The effect on Concordat forces was devastating. But not because of casualties. Most human attacks resulted in very few deaths. The devastation was psychological. Prey animals have deeply ingrained instincts about predators. When a Vree hears an unexpected sound, its body floods with adrenaline, its eyes widen, its muscles tense to run. These instincts had been dormant for thousands of years of Concordat peace. But now, they came roaring back to life. Kelith officers began hearing human ships in every sensor ghost, every background radiation pattern, every unexplained noise. Their sensitive ears, evolved to detect approaching predators, now worked against them, finding threats in harmless sounds. Vree crews with their side-facing eyes struggled with human boarding tactics. Humans had evolved as forward-facing predators, and their combat techniques exploited the natural blind spots in Vree vision. They would attack from directly ahead or behind, the areas where Vree sight was weakest. Arxians, with their long necks and defensive herding instincts, found themselves unable to cope with human persistence. On their homeworld, predators would give up if prey could escape the immediate area. But humans didn't give up. They would pursue for days, weeks, always watching, always waiting for the moment of weakness. Within a month of the first attacks, Concordat forces in human territory were showing signs of severe stress. Ships traveled in larger and larger groups, afraid to separate. Crews refused to patrol alone. Medical officers reported increasing cases of anxiety, paranoia, and panic disorders. Admiral Theron tried to adapt. He reorganized his fleet into tighter formations. He increased patrol frequencies. He established better communication protocols. But nothing helped, because every adaptation he made was based on the assumption that he was fighting an enemy fleet. He wasn't fighting a fleet. He was being hunted by ghosts, who struck without warning and vanished without trace. The breaking point came at Sidara Station, a major Concordat logistics hub 30 light-years from Earth. The station was massive, housing 15,000 personnel and serving as a supply depot for 300 ships. It was protected by a defensive fleet of 200 vessels and had weapon platforms that could destroy anything within 1,000 kilometers. A human fleet of 30 ships approached the station openly, making no effort to hide. They broadcast a simple message: "Surrender the station, or we will take it." Theron, watching from the harmonious dawn, felt relief. Finally, a conventional battle. Something he understood. All ships, engage the human fleet. Show them why they cannot win. The battle began. The Concordat fleet outnumbered the humans nearly 7-1. Their weapons were more advanced. Their shields were stronger. By any logical analysis, they should have won easily. But the battle didn't end. It kept going, and going, and going. Concordat doctrine called for ships to fight in shifts. Crews would engage for 4 hours, then withdraw to rest while fresh crews took their place. This allowed personnel to remain alert and effective. The humans should have been following similar patterns. They weren't. Human ships fought continuously. When their crews grew tired, they rotated command structures without leaving the battle. Captains would hand control to their first officers and take short naps in their command chairs, then wake up and take control back. Engineers worked in shifts, but the ships never stopped fighting. 10 hours into the battle, Concordate crews were exhausted. 20 hours in, they were making mistakes. 30 hours in, they were barely functional. The humans kept fighting. 50 hours into the battle, Concordate reinforcements arrived from a neighboring system. They expected to find the human fleet destroyed or retreating. Instead, they found their own forces on the verge of collapse, and the human ships still in formation, still fighting, showing no signs of stopping. 73 hours after it began, Sidara Station fell. The Concordate fleet retreated, leaving the humans in control. Theron received reports of crews collapsing at their stations, of ships crashing into each other because navigators fell asleep, of officers breaking down in tears from exhaustion. The humans didn't pursue. They claimed the station, treated the wounded, and sent the defeated Concordat forces home with another message. Tell your leaders. We can do this forever. Can you? Theron sat in his ready room, staring at casualty reports. The numbers were relatively low. A few thousand dead in a fleet of hundreds of thousands. But the psychological damage was catastrophic. His forces were broken not by superior firepower but by simple relentlessness. He accessed the human cultural database he had been studying and searched for information about human hunting techniques. He found descriptions of persistence hunting, an ancient method where humans would chase prey not by being faster, but by never stopping. They would follow herds for days, sometimes weeks, until the target animal collapsed from exhaustion. Theron looked at his tactical map, at the pattern of human attacks, at the way they never let up, never gave his forces time to recover. The realization hit him like a physical blow. They weren't in a war. They were prey animals being hunted by something that would never, ever stop chasing them. And the hunt had only just begun. The Concordate Council met in emergency session on their capital world of Harmony Prime. The chamber was a magnificent structure, designed to represent the unity of 47 different species. Each member sat in specially designed seats that accommodated their unique physiologies. The walls displayed peaceful images of cooperation and prosperity. Ambassador Kellis stood before them. His long neck bowed in a posture that his species used to show distress. The situation in human territory has become untenable, he reported. We have lost 17% of our forces through attrition, capture, and desertion. Another 24% are reporting psychological casualties that make them unfit for duty. How is this possible? Demanded Council Leader Verna, a member of the rabbit-like species whose crystalline scales were shifting through angry reds and oranges. We sent 800 ships. We have technology thousands of years more advanced than theirs. They have a few dozen colonies, and perhaps 100 functional warships. 97 warships, according to our last count, Kellis corrected gently. But they don't fight like we fight. They don't mass their forces and engage in fleet actions. They scatter. They hide. They strike from unexpected angles and then vanish before we can respond. Cowards, spat a Tortoid Council member, his 6 legs clicking against the floor in agitation. They refuse to face us honorably. With respect, Council member, Kellis said. I don't think they care about honor. They care about winning. And they're succeeding. Another council member, a Kellith with massive ears that twitched constantly, spoke up in a trembling voice. Our soldiers can't sleep. They hear humans in every sound. 3 of our ships fired on each other last week because their crews were convinced they had been infiltrated by human commandos. We found no humans on any of those vessels. They were shooting at shadows. Kellis nodded sadly. The humans have weaponized our own biology against us. Our species evolved as prey animals. We have instincts, deep ones, that activate when predators are near. The humans are triggering those instincts deliberately. He activated a holographic display showing footage from a human raid on a Concordate patrol. The video was from a Vree ship's internal cameras. It showed corridors. Quiet, and normal. Then suddenly, a section of wall exploded inward. Human Marines poured through, moving in a tight formation that kept them in each other's peripheral vision, while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. But what made the footage particularly striking was where they appeared from. They had cut through the wall at the exact point where the VRI crew's side-facing eyes created a natural blind spot. The camera caught VRI officers spinning around in panic, their eyes unable to track the fast-moving humans, until it was too late. They studied us, Kellis explained. They learned how our eyes work, how our minds work, how our societies work, and then they designed tactics specifically to exploit our weaknesses. Then we study them in return, Verna declared. We learn their weaknesses. We adapt. We've been trying, Kellis said quietly. But every time we adapt, they change their approach. And there's something else. Something I think the Council needs to understand about humans and their evolution. He changed the display to show videos from ancient Earth. Humans chasing animals across endless grasslands under a burning sun. The prey ran fast, but the humans just kept walking, hour after hour, never stopping. Eventually, the animals collapsed from heat and exhaustion, and the humans simply walked up and killed them. This is called persistence hunting, Kellis explained. It was humanity's primary hunting method for millions of years. They didn't need to be faster than their prey. They didn't need to be stronger. They just needed to be more stubborn. They would chase their target until it physically couldn't run anymore, and then they would take it. He gestured to the tactical map of the conflict. Look at the pattern. They're doing the same thing to us. They're not trying to win battles. They're trying to exhaust us. Every raid, every ambush, every attack is designed to keep us moving, keep us scared, wear us down until we can't fight anymore. The chamber was silent. Finally, a VRI council member spoke, his voice uncertain. What do we do? We have 3 options, Kellis said. First, we could withdraw completely. Abandon human territory and let them have their freedom. Second, we could escalate. Bring in more ships, more forces. Try to overwhelm them with sheer numbers. Third, we could negotiate. Negotiate? Verna's scales flashed angry crimson. They rejected our generous offer. They chose violence over peace. Why would we negotiate now? Because we're losing, Kellis said simply. Not in a way that shows up on casualty reports, but in every way that matters. Our member species are terrified. Ships are refusing to deploy to human territory. 3 species have threatened to leave the Concordat entirely if we continue this conflict. And the humans? They're getting stronger. Every supply depot they capture gives them resources. Every prisoner they take gives them intelligence. Every day this continues, they learn more about us, while we learn very little about them. The Council voted. By a narrow margin, they chose escalation. They would not negotiate with predators. They would not abandon 8,000 years of Concordat law. They would send more ships, more resources, more personnel. They would turn human space into a fortress that nothing could escape. But escalation required time. Ships had to be called in from across Concordat space. Crews had to be trained and prepared. Equipment had to be manufactured and distributed. While the Concordat prepared its massive response, humanity continued to hunt. The effect on Concordat species was devastating. The Kelith were suffering worst of all. Their sensitive hearing, evolved to detect predators in dense forests, had become a curse. Kelith crews reported hearing footsteps in empty corridors, breathing in sealed rooms. Whispers, in the static of communication systems. One Kelith ship, the Gentle Dawn, requested emergency evacuation after the entire crew became convinced that humans were hiding somewhere in their vessel. A rescue team searched the ship from end to end and found nothing, but the Kelith crew couldn't be convinced. They had heard the humans. They knew they were there. They refused to return to the ship. The vessel was eventually scuttled because no one would crew it. It became known as the Ghost Ship, and stories about it spread through the fleet, making the psychological damage even worse. The Vree faced different problems. Their wide field of vision, which allowed them to watch for threats from almost any direction, failed against human tactics. Humans had evolved to hunt cooperatively, working in teams to surround and confuse prey. They did the same thing in combat. A Vree guard might be watching a corridor, his eyes covering the entire hallway. Then humans would attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The Vree's brain, designed to track one or two threats at most, would become overwhelmed. By the time the guard figured out which direction to focus on, it was already too late. But the species suffering the most unexpected damage were the Arxians. Their long necks and excellent vision made them seem well-suited for combat. They could see threats from far away. They could communicate effectively with their herds. They should have been natural soldiers. Instead, they were falling apart. The problem was psychological. Arxians evolved in herds on open grasslands. When predators attacked, the herd would bunch together and run as a group. If the predators gave up the chase after a certain distance, the herd was safe. Their entire survival strategy was based on the idea that predators would eventually stop pursuing. Humans didn't stop. An Arxian patrol would encounter a human ship, engage briefly, and then retreat to a safe distance. In their minds, the threat should be over. But hours later, they would detect the same human ship following them. They would jump to another system. The human ship would follow. They would go 3 systems away. The human ship would still be there, hanging in the darkness just outside weapons range, watching and waiting. Arxian officers began reporting nightmares about being chased forever, about running through infinite space with predators always behind them. Some had complete psychological breaks, curling up in their quarters and refusing to come out. Captain Sarah Chen listened to intercepted concordate communications and heard the fear in alien voices. Part of her felt guilty. These weren't evil creatures. They were just people who had built a society based on their own evolutionary needs and now couldn't understand why humans wouldn't follow the same rules. But another part of her, the part that had evolved from 4 million years of human hunters, felt a grim satisfaction. The Concordat had threatened Earth with extinction. They had demanded humanity accept permanent imprisonment. They had shown images of planets burning and species dying and said, "Submit, or this will be you." They had made themselves prey. "Captain, we've got another target," her tactical officer reported. "Looks like a command ship. Heavy escort, but they're moving through the Kepler belt. Lots of asteroids to hide in." Sarah studied the tactical plot. The Concordat was learning, but slowly. They kept their ships together now, traveling in large groups for mutual protection. But large groups were easier to track and easier to predict. "Do we have enough ships for a coordinated strike?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. The Silent Echo and the Shadow's Edge are both within range. We could hit them from 3 directions. Vicinity 170, Sarah made her decision. "Send the signal. We attack in 6 hours. And make sure we leave survivors. I want them to tell the others what happened." The attack went exactly as planned. 3 human ships emerged from hiding spots in the asteroid field and struck the Concordat formation from different angles. The aliens tried to form a defensive sphere, their instincts crying out to bunch together for safety. But bunching together just made them easier targets. Human weapons, crude compared to Concordat technology but effective nonetheless, tore through shields and armor. Within 20 minutes, the Concordat formation broke. Ships scattered in random directions, their crews' prey instincts overriding training and discipline. The humans didn't pursue all of them. They selected one ship, an Arxian cruiser, and followed it. Just followed it. They didn't fire. They didn't communicate. They just maintained position 5,000 kilometers behind the fleeing vessel. Sarah watched the Arxian ship on her displays. It jumped to another system. The Silent Knife followed. It changed course randomly. The Silent Knife matched every turn. It called for help. The Silent Knife jammed the communication. After 16 hours, the Arxian ship simply stopped moving. Sarah received a communication request and accepted it. The Arxian captain appeared on screen, his long neck drooping in a posture of complete defeat. He said through the translator, "Please stop. We surrender. We'll give you anything. Just please stop following us." Sarah felt a surge of pity. But she pushed it down. "Tell your superiors what happened here." "Tell," she said. "Tell them that humans don't give up. Tell them that you can run, but we'll always follow. Tell them that they made us hunters, and now, they're the prey." She let the Arxian ship go. Within days, the story spread through the Concordat fleet. Ships began surrendering the moment humans appeared, too psychologically damaged to fight anymore. Admiral Theron received reports of entire squadrons refusing to patrol. Crews were abandoning their posts. 3 species had filed formal complaints with the Council, demanding the war end immediately. He sat in his command center and studied everything they knew about humans. He read their history, their culture, their biology. And slowly, he began to understand something that terrified him. The Concordat had made a fundamental error. They had assumed humans were just another predator species, like the Kethric they had destroyed centuries ago. But the Kethric had been ambush predators, powerful but impatient. If prey escaped the initial attack, the Kethric moved on to easier targets. Humans were different. They were persistence hunters. They had evolved in one of the harshest environments on their planet, where prey animals were faster and stronger than them, so they had developed a different strategy. They didn't need to be the strongest. They just needed to be the most stubborn. And now they were using that 4-million-year-old strategy against the Concordat. Theron wrote a report to the Council. He detailed the psychological casualties, the collapsing morale, the spreading fear. He included projections showing that within 6 months, the Concordat forces in human territory would be completely non-functional, even if humans never fired another shot. He concluded with a recommendation that would have been unthinkable just months ago: immediate withdrawal and recognition of human sovereignty. The Council rejected his report. They sent orders for the full escalation to proceed. 4,000 ships were being assembled, the largest fleet in Concordat history. They would go to Earth itself, occupy the human home world, and force humanity to surrender by threatening their core population. When Theron received these orders, he looked at his exhausted crew and made a decision. He sent one final message to the Council. "You don't understand what we're facing. These aren't just predators. They're humans. And humans don't stop hunting until their prey falls down and can't get up again. We're the prey now, and we're already falling." Then he ordered his ship to withdraw from human territory. Half his fleet followed him. The other half stayed, too afraid to move, too afraid to fight, just waiting in the darkness for the hunters they knew were out there, watching and waiting. The Concordat's largest fleet was forming up for an attack on Earth, but in the darkness between stars, human ships were already moving into position, not to defend Earth, but to turn the entire Sol system into the largest hunting ground humanity had ever created. The prey were coming, and the hunters were ready. Ambassador Kellis stood before the Concordat Council once more, but this time, the chamber's peaceful atmosphere was gone. The walls displayed tactical maps showing territories in red where Concordat forces had withdrawn. The representatives sat with tense postures, their various species' stress signals on full display. "We have lost control of 37% of our claimed territory in human space," Kellis reported, his long neck held low. "Not through military defeat, but through abandonment. Our member species are refusing to send ships to those regions. The populations are terrified." Number 10. Council Leader Verna's crystalline scales shifted through dark, troubled colors. How can an entire civilization be paralyzed by fear of one primitive species? "Because they're not primitive," Kellis said quietly. "They're specialized. 8,000 years ago, when the Concordat was founded, We believed we had evolved beyond the primitive struggle of predator and prey. We thought intelligence and technology had made those old instincts irrelevant. The humans are proving us wrong. He activated a holographic display showing psychological assessment reports from across the Concordat military. The statistics were damning. 42% of Keleth personnel were experiencing severe anxiety disorders. 67% of VRE soldiers showed symptoms of paranoid hypervigilance. Arxian crews had the highest rate of complete psychological collapse at 31%. I've been consulting with our xenobiologists and evolutionary psychologists, Kellis continued. They've helped me understand something crucial about humans that we missed in our initial assessments. He brought up an image of ancient Earth, showing the African savanna where humans first evolved. Most predators on Earth were ambush hunters or pursuit predators that relied on speed. A lion would chase prey for a short distance. A leopard would attack from hiding. If the prey escaped the initial encounter, the predator would give up and look for easier targets. This is how most predator species operate, because hunting requires energy, and energy is valuable. We know this, Verna said impatiently. What's your point? My point is that humans evolved differently, Kellis replied. They became persistence hunters. Look at this. The display showed ancient humans tracking prey across endless grasslands. The footage was reconstructed from archaeological evidence and anthropological studies, showing how humans would identify a target animal and then simply start walking after it. The prey would run away quickly, but the humans would follow at a steady pace. Hours would pass. The prey would rest, thinking it was safe, and then see the humans still coming. More running, more resting, more humans, always approaching, never stopping. The prey animals were faster and stronger than humans, Kellis explained. But humans had two advantages. First, they could sweat, allowing them to cool their bodies during long chases. Their prey would overheat and need to rest. Second, and more importantly, humans had the mental capacity to simply not give up. They would chase for hours, sometimes days, until the animal, literally, couldn't run anymore. A Keleth council member spoke up, ears trembling. But surely that's just ancient history. Modern humans use technology. Weapons. Ships, yes. Kellis agreed. But the psychology remains. Humans are psychologically adapted to persistence. They don't think like we do. When we encounter a problem, our instinct is to seek safety, regroup, and approach from a position of strength. When humans encounter a problem, their instinct is to keep pushing until the problem is solved, or they die trying. He changed the display to show recent battle reports. Look at Sidera Station. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior defensive positions. We should have won easily, but the humans just kept fighting. 73 hours of continuous combat. Our crews collapsed from exhaustion, while their crews rotated shifts without ever leaving the battle. They didn't win because they were better fighters. They won because they were willing to keep fighting longer than we could. This is madness, a Tortoid council member said. No rational species behaves this way. That's exactly the problem, Kellis said, his voice heavy with concern. We're trying to understand humans as rational actors like ourselves, but their rationality is built on a different foundation. They evolved in an environment where giving up meant death, where persistence was the only path to survival. That psychology is still there, buried deep in their minds. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I've studied their cultural history, their stories, their myths, their values. Do you know what they celebrate most? Not intelligence, not cooperation, not peace. They celebrate determination, persistence, the refusal to give up even when the situation is hopeless. They have thousands of stories about individuals who kept fighting against impossible odds and somehow won. Those stories aren't just entertainment, they're cultural programming, teaching each generation that humans don't quit. The chamber fell silent as the council members absorbed this information. Finally, Verna spoke. Then we must break them. We must show them that persistence isn't enough against overwhelming force. That's why I'm here, Kellis said. The Council has ordered the assembly of the Grand Fleet. 4,000 ships, representing every major species in the Concordat. It's being positioned to strike at Earth itself. Yes, Verna said with satisfaction. We'll occupy their home world. Hold their population hostage. They'll have to surrender then. Kellis shook his head slowly. I don't think they will. I think we're about to make the worst mistake in Concordat history. Explain, Verna demanded. Kellis brought up more human cultural data. I've been studying human military history. Do you know what happens when you back humans into a corner? When you threaten their homes directly? They don't surrender. They become even more dangerous. They have a term for it. Total war. It means they stop following rules, stop holding back, stop caring about anything except destroying the threat to their home. He showed historical footage from human conflicts. Cities reduced to rubble while humans fought in the ruins. Ships deliberately crashed into enemy vessels. Soldiers fighting to the last person. This is what humans do when they're cornered. They don't calculate odds and surrender when the numbers are unfavorable. They fight with everything they have until either they win or they're dead. Surely we can destroy them before it reaches that point, suggested a council member. Can we? Kellis asked. Admiral Theron's report, which the council dismissed, indicated that our forces are already psychologically compromised. We're sending 4,000 ships to Earth, yes, but those ships are crewed by prey animals who are already terrified of humans. What happens when we get to Earth and find it empty again? Or worse, what happens when we occupy it and then face years of human resistance, raiding our supply lines, hunting our patrols, never giving us a moment's peace? Then we'll destroy Earth, Verna said coldly. Like we did to the Kethric. The Kethric were concentrated on a few worlds, Kellis countered. Humans have already scattered. We know they've established hidden bases in asteroid fields, on rogue planets, in the outer darkness of dozens of systems. Even if we destroy Earth, we won't destroy humanity. We'll just make them even more determined to hunt us. He took a deep breath. I believe we need to negotiate. Not from a position of weakness, but from a position of mutual respect. Offer them true autonomy in exchange for non-aggression. Let them expand, but establish clear boundaries. Work with them instead of trying to dominate them. Negotiate with predators? Verna's scales flashed angry red. That's not the Concordat way. We've maintained peace for 8,000 years by ensuring predators never gain power. If we compromise now, the entire foundation of our civilization crumbles. Our civilization is already crumbling, Kellis said quietly. 3 member species have threatened to leave. 5 more are demanding we end the conflict. Our people are terrified. Our economy is suffering. Our unity is breaking. All because we refuse to accept that not all species think like we do. The council voted. By a wider margin this time, they confirmed the attack on Earth. The Grand Fleet would proceed as planned. They would occupy humanity's home world, break their will to resist, and force them to accept Concordat authority. Kellis returned to his quarters after the vote and sat in darkness, his thoughts heavy. He had failed to convince them. The Concordat was about to walk into a trap of its own making, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He accessed his personal files and pulled up everything he had learned about humans. Their history, their psychology, their evolution. One file caught his attention. A collection of human quotations. Things humans had said throughout their history that revealed their character. One quote stood out. It was from an ancient human military leader named Winston Churchill, spoken during a terrible war when his people faced overwhelming odds. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Kellis read it again. Never surrender. Not, we'll surrender when the odds are impossible. Not, we'll surrender when we've lost too much. Never surrender. He thought about the Grand Fleet. 4,000 ships full of prey animals, whose ancestors had survived by knowing when to run. They were about to encounter a species whose ancestors had survived by never knowing when to stop. He recorded a personal message to his family back on his home world. He told them he loved them. He told them he had tried to prevent what was coming. He told them that if he didn't return, they should remember him as someone who tried to bridge the gap between two fundamentally different types of species. Then he prepared to depart with the Grand Fleet. As the Concordate's leading expert on humans, his presence had been requested for the invasion. He would go. But not because he thought the mission would succeed. He would go because someone needed to be there to witness what happened when prey animals tried to cage a predator. The Grand Fleet assembled at a staging point 3 light-years from Earth. 4,000 ships, the combined military might of 47 species. They represented 8,000 years of concordate civilization, technological advancement, and peaceful cooperation. Kellis stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Peace, watching the fleet form up through the view screens. It was magnificent, awe-inspiring. Surely this display of power would be enough to make humans see reason. But in his heart, Kellis knew better. He had studied humans too well. He understood them too deeply. And what he understood terrified him. Humans weren't going to see this fleet as overwhelming force. They were going to see it as the largest group of prey animals ever assembled in one place. And somewhere out there in the darkness, human ships were watching and planning. Not how to defend against this fleet. Not how to survive its attack. How to hunt it. The Grand Fleet prepared to jump to Earth, confident in their superiority. They didn't understand that they weren't going to war. They were walking into a hunting ground where every instinct they possessed would work against them, where their very nature as prey animals made them vulnerable, where their opponent had spent 4 million years perfecting the art of the chase. Kellis whispered a prayer to the spirits of his ancestors, asking for forgiveness. The Concordat had made its choice. Now they would all learn what it meant to be prey to something that never, ever stopped hunting. The Grand Fleet jumped to hyperspace, headed for Earth. Behind them, human scouts immediately sent word through covert networks. The prey is coming. All ships, prepare for the largest hunt in human history. And in 1,000 hidden bases across human space, men and women checked their weapons, powered up their ships, and smiled cold smiles. The Concordat thought they were bringing war to Earth. They were wrong. War would have been kinder. What humanity was about to do was something far older, far more primal. They were going to teach the galaxy what happens when prey animals threaten a persistence hunter's home. The Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system in perfect formation. 4,000 ships, their hulls gleaming in the distant light of Earth's sun. The fleet commander, a Vree admiral named Torak, surveyed his forces with satisfaction. Nothing could stand against such power. All ships, maintain formation, he ordered. Advance to Earth orbit. Prepare occupation forces. The fleet began its approach, moving in a tight defensive sphere that had been carefully calculated to provide mutual protection for every vessel. It was a formation that had never been broken in 8,000 years of Concordat military history. What Torak couldn't see was that every ship in his fleet was being watched. In the asteroid belt, human scouts tracked the fleet's progress. On the outer planets, sensor stations recorded every ship's signature. Hidden bases throughout the system fed real-time data to a command center deep inside Mars, where General Marcus Webb coordinated humanity's response. "They're coming in tight," Webb observed, studying the tactical display. "Just like we predicted. Prey animals bunch together when threatened." Captain Sarah Chen stood beside him, her expression cold and focused. "Do we have final counts on our assets?" "Every ship we can spare," Webb replied. 374 combat vessels, plus another 200 converted civilian ships with improvised weapons. We're still outnumbered 10 to 1. "Numbers don't matter," Sarah said quietly. They're thinking about this wrong. They think they're invading. They don't understand they're entering a trap. Webb nodded and opened a communication channel that reached every human ship in the system. All units. This is command. The prey has entered the hunting ground. The Concordat fleet continued its advance, unaware. They scanned for human ships and found only empty space. They approached Earth and saw a planet dark and silent, just like before. No defensive fleet. No weapons platforms. Nothing. They've abandoned their homeworld again, Torak said with disappointment. Scan the system for population signatures. His sensor officer worked for several minutes, then reported. Sir, I'm detecting heat signatures throughout the asteroid belt. Power readings on several outer moons. They're scattered across the entire system. Then we'll dig them out one by one, Torak declared. All ships, break into squadron formations. We'll systematically search every location until... He never finished the sentence. From the asteroid belt, from behind the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, from the cold outer reaches of the system, human ships appeared. Not all at once, but in small groups, dozens of them, attacking from every direction simultaneously. The Concordat fleet tried to respond, but their tight defensive formation became a liability. Ships couldn't maneuver without risking collision with their neighbors. The humans struck at the edges of the formation, targeting isolated vessels, and then vanishing back into the darkness before reinforcements could respond. Maintain formation, Torak ordered. Don't break ranks. But breaking ranks was exactly what the Concordat crews wanted to do. Every prey instinct they possessed screamed at them to scatter, to run, to find safety in isolation, rather than staying bunched together where they made easy targets. The human attacks continued. Small and precise. A squadron of 3 human ships would emerge from hiding, fire on a single Concordat vessel, and disappear. Then another group would attack from a different direction, then another. The Concordat fleet twisted and turned, trying to face threats that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Hours passed, then days. The human attacks never stopped. Concordat crews took shifts, but the attacks came at random intervals designed to disrupt sleep patterns. Alarms would sound just as crew members were falling asleep. Battles would start and stop without warning. The psychological pressure was immense. After 3 days, the first Concordat ships broke formation. A squadron of Keleth vessels, their crews driven to the edge of madness by the constant sound of alarms and weapons fire, simply fled the system. Then more ships followed. Then more. Hold your positions, Torak broadcast desperately. We must maintain unit cohesion, but unit cohesion was falling apart. Prey animals that had been forced into an unnatural formation were reverting to their instincts. They wanted to run, to hide, to get away from the predators hunting them. Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the Silent Knife as the Concordat formation began to disintegrate. Now, she said quietly. Hit them now. Humanity's full fleet emerged from hiding. 374 warships and 200 armed civilian vessels appeared throughout the system. No longer hiding, no longer hit-and-run tactics. They spread out in a loose perimeter around the Concordat fleet and began a systematic assault. But even now, humans didn't fight like the Concordat expected. They didn't charge in for a decisive battle. They maintained distance, firing from maximum range, forcing the Concordat ships to constantly maneuver, constantly defend, constantly stay alert. The battle that followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a siege, a hunt, a test of endurance. The Concordat fleet had more ships, better weapons, stronger shields, but none of that mattered because the humans simply wouldn't let them rest. Concordat doctrine called for ships to engage for 4 hours, then withdraw to rest while fresh ships took their place. The humans rotated crews, but never stopped attacking. When one human ship needed to recharge weapons or repair damage, another took its place. The pressure never ceased. Admiral Torak tried every tactical formation he knew. Defensive spheres, aggressive wedges, dispersed patterns, concentrated cores. Nothing worked because the humans adapted to every change. When the fleet concentrated, humans attacked from multiple directions. When the fleet dispersed, humans isolated individual ships and hunted them down. 5 days into the battle, Concordate crews were hallucinating from exhaustion. Kelith officers heard human voices in the ship's ventilation systems. Vree soldiers saw human boarding parties in every shadow. Arxians stopped eating, their stress hormones suppressing all appetite. The human fleet didn't relent. On the 7th day, a Concordate supply convoy trying to reach the fleet was intercepted and destroyed. On the 9th day, 3 Concordate ships collided with each other because their navigators fell asleep at their stations. On the 12th day, an entire squadron of Tortoid vessels surrendered without firing a shot. Their crews too exhausted to continue. Ambassador Kellis watched from the eternal peace as the Grand Fleet fell apart around him. He had tried to warn them. He had tried to make them understand, but the Council had been certain that overwhelming force would break human resistance. They had been wrong. He requested a meeting with Admiral Torak and found the Vree commander slumped in his chair. Eyes bloodshot. Body trembling with exhaustion. "We need to withdraw," Kellis said gently. "We can't," Torak replied, his voice hoarse. "The Council ordered us to occupy Earth, to break human resistance, to force their surrender. The humans aren't going to surrender," Kellis said. "Can't you see that? They're doing to us exactly what their ancestors did to prey animals on ancient Earth. They're wearing us down. They're not trying to win a battle. They're trying to make us collapse from exhaustion. Then what do? Torak asked desperately. "We surrender," Kellis said simply. The words hung in the air like a curse. Surrender. The Concordat had never surrendered. In 8,000 years of history, they had always been the ones who forced others to submit. "The Council will never approve," Torak said. "Then we do it without approval," Kellis replied. "Because if we don't, this fleet is going to be destroyed. Not in combat, but through simple attrition. Our people are breaking. In another week, we won't have a functional fleet anymore. We'll just have 4,000 ships full of traumatized crews who can't fight, can't think, can't do anything but run." Torak was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Contact the humans. Request a meeting." The message went out on open frequencies. "To human forces, the Concordat Grand Fleet requests parley. We wish to discuss terms." 2. The human attacks stopped immediately. Not gradually, but all at once. As if a switch had been flipped. The sudden silence was almost more unnerving than the constant combat had been. Sarah Chen received authorization from General Webb to represent humanity in negotiations. She took a shuttle to a neutral location between the fleets. A small station that had been abandoned when the war began. She arrived to find Ambassador Kellis waiting alone. The Arxian looked exhausted. His long neck drooping, his eyes dull. When he spoke, his translated voice was heavy with defeat. "We surrender," he said simply. "The Grand Fleet withdraws from Sol System and all human-claimed territory. We recognize human sovereignty. We request only that you allow our ships to leave peacefully." Sarah studied him carefully. "Why should we agree? We have you trapped. We could destroy your fleet. Why? 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 Why?" "You could," Kellis agreed. "It would take time. But yes, you could do it. But I don't think you want to. I've studied your culture. Humans prefer to avoid killing when possible. You value mercy, even toward enemies. You've demonstrated this by taking prisoners instead of killing them, by sending wounded aliens back instead of leaving them to die." He was right, and Sarah knew it. Humans were predators, yes, but they were also social animals with deep capacity for empathy. The idea of slaughtering 4,000 ships full of exhausted, terrified prey animals wasn't appealing. "What about your council?" she asked. "Will they honor this surrender?" Kellis made a gesture that Sarah's translator rendered as a shrug. "Some will. Some won't. The Concordat is fracturing. 3 species have already announced they're leaving to form their own coalition. 5 more are considering it. Your war has exposed fundamental weaknesses in our society that we refused to acknowledge." "What weaknesses?" "That prey animals, no matter how advanced, are still prey animals," Kellis said sadly. "We built a civilization based on the idea that we had evolved beyond our primitive instincts, but you've proven that instincts run deeper than culture or technology. When faced with a true predator, we revert to what we are: frightened herbivores running from a hunter." Sarah felt an unexpected surge of pity for the alien. "It doesn't have to be this way. We didn't want this war." "I know," Kellis said. "We forced you into it by threatening your home. We should have known better. Backing a predator into a corner doesn't make it submit. It makes it fight with everything it has." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. Kellis looked at her with his large, side-facing eyes. Now you've taught the galaxy an important lesson: that predators aren't inherently evil, and prey aren't inherently good. That different species have different strengths and weaknesses. That cooperation is more effective than domination." He paused, then continued. "And you've taught us something specific about humans: that you are persistence hunters. That you don't know how to give up. That threatening your home doesn't break your will, it focuses it. Every species in this region of space will remember what happened here. They'll remember that the Concordat sent 4,000 ships to Earth, and those ships came home broken. Will that make them afraid of us?" Sarah asked. "Some, yes," Kellis admitted. "But others? Others will be curious. They'll want to know more about the species that fought 8,000 years of history and won. Some will want to trade with you. Some will want to learn from you. Some will want your protection." Sarah considered this. "We're not conquerors. We don't want to rule over other species." "I know," Kellis said. "I've read your history. You've had empires, yes, but you've also had democracies, federations, alliances. You understand cooperation. You just refuse to cooperate at the cost of your freedom. So, what do you suggest?" Kellis pulled up a holographic display showing the region of space around Earth. "This area, roughly 50 light-years in radius, is in chaos right now. Former Concordat species leaving, uncertain of what comes next. They need leadership. They need a new model for how different species can coexist." "You want us to build a new alliance?" Sarah asked. "Not just humans," Kellis said. "Humans and whoever wants to join you. Species who can see that predator and prey can coexist if they choose cooperation over domination." Sarah thought about it. It was audacious. It was risky. It would mean taking on responsibilities humanity had never imagined. But it was also an opportunity to prove that humans weren't just mindless killers, that they could be protectors as well as hunters. "I'll take this back to my superiors," she said. "No promises. That's all I ask," Kellis replied. "And Sarah? May I call you Sarah?" "Sure. I want you to understand something. I don't hate humans. I never did. I was afraid of you. Yes, but I also admired you. Your determination, your refusal to accept defeat, your loyalty to each other. Those are noble qualities, even when they're terrifying to face in combat. Why are you telling me this? Because in the days ahead, you're going to hear a lot of species say terrible things about humans. They'll call you savage, violent, dangerous. Some of it will be fair. But I want you to remember that at least one Concordat member saw you clearly. You're not monsters. You're just different. And different isn't evil." Sarah felt unexpected emotion welling up. "Thank you." The Concordat Grand Fleet withdrew from Sol system that day. Ships limped away in small groups, their crews exhausted and traumatized but alive. Human vessels tracked them to the border of human space, and then let them go. The war was over. In the months that followed, exactly as Kellis predicted, the Concordat began to fracture. Species that had been held together by fear of external threats found that the fear wasn't enough when the threat became internal dissent. Within a year, 16 species had left the Concordat entirely. Many of those species reached out to humanity. Some wanted trade agreements. Some wanted mutual defense pacts. Some just wanted to talk to the species that had done the impossible. Earth convened a conference, inviting any species interested in forming a new alliance based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation. 53 species sent representatives. It was called the Sol Accord, and its founding principle was simple. No species would be forced to join. No species would be restricted based on their evolutionary history, and all members would be free to develop as they wished. Kellis attended as an independent observer, no longer representing the Concordat that had rejected his counsel. He watched as humans, the species he had once come to threaten with extinction, worked patiently with dozens of different aliens to build something new. On the final day of the conference, he spoke privately with President Morrison. "Your people surprised me," he said. "I expected triumphalism, arrogance. Instead, I see patience and diplomacy." Morrison smiled. "Humans are complicated. We can be vicious hunters when we need to be. But we're also pack animals. We're loyal. We're protective. We form bonds across species. Boundaries we've been domesticating and befriending other animals for thousands of years. That same instinct applies to sapient species too." "The galaxy is going to be different now," Kellis observed. "Yes," Morrison agreed. "But maybe it needed to be. Your Concordat was stable, but it was also stagnant. You'd achieved peace by eliminating diversity, by forcing everyone to conform to prey animal psychology. That's not sustainable. And you think your way is?" "I think our way makes room for everyone," Morrison said. "Predators and prey, social species and solitary ones, aggressive cultures and peaceful ones. We just need to accept that different species have different needs and different strengths." Kellis looked out at the conference floor, where dozens of species were arguing, debating, compromising, and slowly building consensus. It was messy and chaotic compared to the orderly Concordat proceedings he was used to. But it was also alive in a way the Concordat had never been. "You know what the hardest thing for me to accept is?" Kellis said quietly. "That you were right. That we gave you one last warning, threatening extinction if you didn't submit, and you demonstrated that you were always the hunters. Not because you chose violence, but because you refused to be prey. And in doing so, you've built something better than what we had." Morrison put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of friendship that crossed species boundaries. "You're welcome here, you know. The Sol Accord isn't just for species that left the Concordat. It's for anyone who wants to build something new." Kellis felt something he hadn't expected to feel after everything that had happened. "I'll consider it," he said. Years later, historians would look back on the human Concordat War and debate its significance. Some called it inevitable, a clash between fundamentally different evolutionary psychologies. Others called it a tragedy, a conflict that could have been avoided with better communication. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. They had proven that predators and prey could coexist. They had shown that determination and persistence could overcome superior numbers and technology. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that the old rules written by prey species 8,000 years ago, were no longer adequate for a galaxy that was more diverse and complex than anyone had imagined. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Silent Knife, now retrofitted as a patrol vessel for the Sol Accord. She looked out at the stars and thought about everything that had happened. The war, the hunting, the terror they had inflicted on species that had never faced true predators before. Part of her felt guilty. Part of her knew they'd had no choice, and part of her felt a deep, ancient satisfaction. The satisfaction of a persistence hunter who had chased prey across impossible distances and finally brought it down. But now the hunt was over. Now it was time to do what humans had always done after the successful hunt. Share the meat with the pack, tell stories around the fire, and welcome newcomers who wanted a place at the table. "Captain," her communications officer called, "we're getting a distress signal from a Kelith colony. They say they're being raided by pirates and request Sol Accord assistance." Sarah smiled. A new hunt, but a different kind. Not hunting to kill or dominate, but hunting to protect. That, too, was part of being a predator. The drive to defend the pack. "Set course," she ordered. Maximum speed. The silent knife turned toward the Kelith colony, and Sarah felt that old familiar feeling. The focus, the determination, the absolute certainty that she would not stop until the job was done. Because humans were hunters. That would never change. But they had proven something the galaxy needed to learn. Hunters could choose what they hunted. They could hunt threats instead of innocence. They could hunt injustice instead of the weak. They could hunt problems instead of prey. The Concordat had given them one last warning. Submit or face extinction. Humanity had demonstrated that they were always the hunters. And now, the whole galaxy was learning what it meant to have hunters on their side instead of stalking them from the darkness. The age of the Concordat was over. The age of the hunters had begun. And paradoxically, the galaxy was safer for it.